Good morning again. We are ready for the second session of this morning. And this one is going to talk about the next generation of sports professionals. I am super excited about this panel. I'm going to let my actual panelist introduce himself, Dr. CAVIL. But I also want to introduce Ms. Sydney Jackson, who was one of my student athletes when I was at Hampton University. So this is why we're giving her this opportunity, as she is part of the next generation of sports professionals. So with that, I will turn it over to Sydney. She's going to moderate this panel.
All right, good morning, everyone. Again, I am Sydney Jackson. I am a graduate of Hampton University and also a master's graduate of NJIT University with my MBA in marketing. I did play soccer at Hampton, so that's a little bit about me. And today,
Thank you. I guess it depends on what responsibilities are. Some people say, what is your real job? My main responsibilities is as a professor, right, at Texas Southern University. I had the responsibility and the opportunity to develop a sport management program here. It's hard to imagine, almost 15 years ago in 2010, undergraduate program, sport management. And then a couple of years later, with the help of Dr. Blouse, others involved, Dr. Fisher, we developed a master's program, MS in sports studies and sports leadership. And so that's one side of the shield. Currently, I serve as the interim associate dean of academic affairs here at Texas Southern University in the College of Education, where a lot of my responsibilities are with the development and the doctoral program, make sure students enter successfully and then are able to navigate that space and hopefully come out on the other end being able to call themselves a doctor in either curriculum instruction, ed administration, higher ed, or counseling. And finally, I get to work as a assistant to the VP of athletics, Dr. Kevin Green, here. So I've got my foot in athletics and really talk about innovation and strategic planning on that side about how do you build out your program in such a way that you can take advantage of areas that you may have not thought about before.
Okay, so with your area of expertise, how do you see the sports industry evolving for sports individuals like myself aspiring to get into the profession, or even on the reverse side, how do you think the new generation will impact the industry?
I'll start with the latter question first. This next generation will impact sports in many different ways because they come with such a different mindset. They come with the mindset of change, innovation, development of the world, and that's a space where they're going to have to navigate because they're going to get a lot of pushback at first. So their ability to navigate that change and bring what the energy they have to the table is going to be very good for the industry in a lot of ways, but it is frankly going to be a challenge. The industry of sports is a very narrow niche avenue, even though it makes billions of dollars and has a lot of different aspects. But many of these experts and folks that have been in the field will probably share with you that the attitudes that they have to deal with oftentimes are very narrow and very shallow in regards to the historic footprint of what those that are in positions of power and control believe athletics is supposed to be. And so oftentimes, particularly from somebody that's a minority, and I'll be frank with you in terms of African Americans and Black, whichever term you prefer, they're navigating that duality of what it means to be culturally responsive and be you in this unique space, but also navigate what people think is traditional about sports. And so that's a lot of the avenue that you're looking at in terms of the implication of getting in this industry and where you fit. So let me explain a little more about what that looks like. Are you talking about being in sports at the amateur level, youth level, and what does that look like? That is a quite different marketplace than being at the professional level. Being regional versus being international. And so that is different. And we haven't even got into college or collegiate athletics. In that space, as you just recently seen, has had tremendous change and disruption in regards to what people believe that space is supposed to look like. So one of the things that you have to navigate from somebody that's young and aspiring to develop and change the world, literally, in terms of young people I talk to, which is nothing wrong with that. But it is one, trying to gain as much knowledge as you know so you can become proficient, but at the same time seeking opportunities in organizations that really allow you to grow.
So with that, as athletes, a lot of, I would say the industry, they are looking for athletes with team building skills or abilities to work with big groups. Again, our schedules may not allow us to go on internships and stuff, so we might not have that tangible experience, but what other things are you looking for from athletes to get into the sport?
First, I would say you have to really find a way to get that tangible experience. There's nothing that's going to escape from that. It doesn't mean that you can't challenge that, but you're going to have to carve out space and find a program, which is why it's important to really do your homework up front in terms of when you're in the recruiting cycle coming from high school to a collegiate environment, really looking at opportunities that allow you and coaches and programs that allow you that duality of being a college player seeking their academics, as well as being able to grow in their academics with internship opportunities. So it is extremely important to do that homework. Now, oftentimes you don't learn that too late. So in that case, coaches are not going to want to do this, but that's where the transfer portal in this new marketplace is a valuable opportunity for you to be able to negotiate that. But you need to, understand and really feel bad about that. But you really need tangible experience in this. And the earlier you can get it, the better in regards to being able to grow and develop those skills that are necessary for you to be successful in that area. Now, to give some examples of what you can do in regards to at least developing your resume to put you in a position to do that is one, making sure that you take advantage on your team. Are you the captain? What does it take to be the captain? What did you do as the captain if you were? What are some examples where you led your team? In sports, oftentimes there's a travel itinerary. Who was responsible for that travel itinerary? Who spoke to the athletes to make sure that everybody was supposed to be at breakfast at a certain time, or be at dinner at a certain time? Who made sure that everybody had their equipment on the bus? What did you do in your captainship role, or as just a leader on the team? How did you take advantage of that to show your skills of leadership and development in that aspect? In terms of learning plays, were you able to navigate that space and become a secondary coach, or were you a coach on the field? And how can you explain that you were a coach and a leader on the field in terms of making sure people were in the right place, doing your skills? And how can you provide specific examples in an interview program of how you navigate that space, or some ways to make some jumps and leaps above the process of showing where you are developing skills necessary to be successful in this thing.
And on the other side, I guess, how can sports professionals embrace entrepreneurship? Like, if let's say they're not going to be professional athletes, how can they build, let's say, a marketing company on their own? How would they navigate that?
Now that's a really great question, and really contextually important. As you alluded to in terms of the generation, I think this generation is built up in an aspect where a lot of young people naturally like the idea of being an entrepreneur. I think one of the first things you want to do is find out what does that really mean. And it doesn't matter whether you're in an organization and you're trying to climb or being an entrepreneur, you really want to do your homework in terms of being a subject matter expert. One of the first things I say in my class when I'm coming in is take advantage of this space to learn everything you can and get involved. Because part of that is being a subject matter expert. And why is that important? Being an entrepreneur in the organization. Because people see subject matter experts. All these individuals that are in there that are in this space that you're talking to, at some level, they have become a subject matter expert. And people seek them out. It's not always about them seeking out opportunities. Now, obviously, if you're an entrepreneur, you're always trying to grow a business. So you have a marketing plan. But the more that you develop over the years, you'll start getting cold calls and folks will say, hey, I want you on this panel, or this project is coming up. I want you to put your information in here. So you're going to need to develop your subject matter expert. And how do you do that? Is a follow-up question, right? It's a natural. How do you become a subject matter expert? Well, some of the best books out there tell you need to spend like 10,000 hours in the craft, right? And so how do you spend 10,000 hours in the craft? Part of that is coming to conferences like this, so you can meet people, you can learn the expertise that folks are talking about. Other things is to read. You're going to need to read those books out there of folks that have successfully navigated the entrepreneurship landmine, roadmaps. What did they do to be successful? And then also doing your homework in terms of the marketplace. Where are the holes in the marketplace? So one specific example is a company that really changed the landscape and disruption, right, of sports. And that's Under Armour when they first came into business. And what drove that? What made them different than other places that were leading, Adidas or Nike, that were leading the area in sports apparel? They navigated the space and had dry fit clubs, right? And they took the industry by storm. And what did they do? Actually, they took some dry fit that they had in a different industry, military segment of the marketplace, and brought it into athletics because they understood that there was an area need for it. Well, they literally opened up the pie. They didn't take a share. They created a share of the market that did not exist, which allowed them to jump headfirst in that market and then grow outside of it and develop other things in the market, shoes, jerseys, and things of that nature. So that's another example of being innovative in entrepreneurship that allows you to literally grow the marketplace. So you need to do your homework and expertise to find out where there are holes in the marketplace. The social media phenomenon that it's all about, right? YouTube, Twitter specifically, have changed the marketplace forever, right? How people look at that. And in fact, they can change it for the positive and the negative. Some people will say part of the ESPN letting go some 20 people, and they say more will come, right? Particularly in terms of talent, was the fact that the business model of communication of sports has changed. No longer are people just subjective to becoming the Fox Sports or ESPN, obviously for the money they can generate and get the big programs, NBA, TV, NFL, and those kind of things. They drive a large part of the market share. But in terms of people talking sports, people now seek to go to YouTube to get their information, or go to Twitter to talk with people they believe are subject matter experts in their area. And specifically where I can give you a case study of where that is unique is HBCU sports. There were several content creators out there that did not believe that there was enough content on HBCU sports. So some young individuals, and I don't call myself young, but I kind of came in there on their backside and understood that and developed it differently. But they created, you got HBCUsports.com out there, HBCU Game Day, that has like 90% of the market share of HBCU sports. And now you see literally ESPN, Fox Sports quoting their articles and Stephen Gaither, Ken Rashad, quoting those individuals that are in that business, that develop that business, that's their sole business, is all they do is provide content on HBCU sports. And they literally can pick up the phone and call an AD at an HBCU, call a coach, and they will get a return phone call and answer a question before leading industry experts supposedly can get that information. So that's two specific examples where innovation and entrepreneurs have grown their business and their platform in such a way, and then you see it even on YouTube with folks. I actually do a show called Inside the HBCU Sports Lab twice a week, and during the fall we do it on Sunday where we talk about HBCU sports.
So from these entrepreneurs, what initiatives have you seen in those, or what initiatives can people go out and look for to find their niche, to find how they're gonna go into that space, or what disruptors, and what can they go see? Like what examples have you seen?
It's another great question. I don't think about that now, but I have to charge you for that expertise. But I will frame it this way to answer your question in all seriousness. Is the fact that some people believe that you gotta have to have that mindset. You gotta have to have an innate mindset after doing your research and becoming an expert to have some foresight of where the market is at. And other folks will say that you develop something and then you tell the market or make the market know that you need it. Outside of sports, I give a specific example. There's a graduate TSU here coming out of the business called Marcus that owns the Breakfast Club. I'm giving him a nice plug. He came up with the idea, at least in this region for sure, if not beyond that, there was a marketplace and people needed to understand that they needed chicken with their waffles for breakfast. And he drove that business. And before long, people was like, oh yeah, you're right, I do want that. So you got to kind of decide and define what that marketplace looks like. So in the sports, one of the things that I have been playing with is trying to understand where is the nexus going in terms of social media platform as you see ESPN, HBCU Go getting into the production of HBCU sports? Where's the intersection between connecting the social media platforms of HBCUsports.com and HBCUGameday.com with HBCU Go and ESPN? Where's that intersection? And if you can find that intersection, there's going to be an opportunity to drive that business further. So I will say that.
And I guess another, just off the question that we have here, excuse me. Do you think the grassroots level is pertinent? Like, do you have to start there? Can you start in the middle? Is there a specific starting point that you suggest?
I think you can start anywhere. I think grassroots is important. Since this is the 50th anniversary of hip hop, I think that's another example of where hip hop was a grassroots art form. And we see that it's a multi-billion-dollar industry now. Now, some people will tell you that has some negative aspects. That's not always good. And so you have to kind of navigate and understand that as well. If once you open it up to the marketplace, you don't necessarily control where it goes and how it navigates it. So one of the things when you start looking at the industry in itself, of where you go is understanding what that looks like in terms of position. So I would say it's going to be important to, again, do your homework, understanding the industry of sports. Specifically in terms of moving away from entrepreneurship and getting into industry, I would suggest the earlier that you can get into, particularly in a collegiate athletics, extremely important. I think somebody had a question with the last platforms, how do you transition professionally, being outside of specifically collegiate athletics and athletics? I would say to be frank with you, it's very challenging. And this is usually the reason why. Because usually professionals are used to making a certain amount of income. Sports is so popular that most of the time, unless you are extremely high and have great relationships, it's hard to come in that industry in terms of mid-management, even more challenging than an executive leadership role. They usually ask you to start at the bottom. But what does that mean? Financially, it means that you have to give up resources. So if you're in a certain position, and don't add in the fact that you might have family responsibilities, it's hard to give up that income. Intercollegiate athletics is real circular and close. The skills that you need to be a leader in athletic administration are pretty much the skills that you need in any other industry in terms of how do you communicate with people, the 7 C's of executive leadership, communication, care, culturally responsive, those type of things. But it's hard to navigate. Most folks will close the door. You can't even get from your resume to an interview if you're not in intercollegiate athletics. The gatekeepers will not, whether it's human resources or some of these management firms, will not even let you in the pool. I'm just being real and frank with you. These folks will tell you that you won't even get in the pool. So the earlier you get in, the better if you want that. The other thing is you really need to navigate and create these relationships with folks that once they get in the leadership position, that they may have the opportunity to open the door for you. But then you're asking them to give up a spot, and you're asking them to lean on their expertise because they're answering to somebody, and people may question them. And there's not a lot of sports. Let's just look at the numbers. In terms of folks that look like us, there's not a lot of people in these executive positions. Now, we're fighting like hell to change that. And these people out here are doing these conferences, the minority of ADs, MOAA, those things, they're working, and coaches are working like hell. And I say that emphatically to people to understand that people are seeking to pave the way for the next generation, but they are fighting a battle that is challenging at best. So you really need to get in as early as possible because that door will close on you. And I want to make sure people understand is that develop your skills, get in as early as you can, navigate the space, be prepared to move. In this industry, you have to be able to move. So if you have a family or you like a place, this may not be the industry for you if you like a certain city. Because these folks have to move 3 or 4 years because things change so fast from presidents to ADs. So you have to be mobile and be able to move from one side of the country to the other. Private and public institutions, graduate, you need to be mobile and you need to be comfortable about living in different places. But if you have, in our culture, a lot of times we have to deal with family. We have to deal, and that makes it a challenge because we are not necessarily as mobile as we'd like to be. So I'm here to tell you that you need to be frank with yourself upfront very early and understand that you're willing to meet these challenges. Because if you are, the opportunity will be there. You'll be successful because you'll make things happen. You'll create relationships and people will respect you for that. And you can navigate this space. So you need to understand the challenges that come with being in this industry in regards to mobility, getting in early, and academically having degree attainments that allow you to achieve in certain areas. So if you can get that early in terms of your bachelor, obviously you got to check that off. Masters is going to be in front. You see a lot of these folks have doctorates. They didn't do that just because easy. They did it because they understood it was important for them to have that additional knowledge base to provide those opportunities for them to even get in the door.
That was gonna be my next question, with, again, we just had a panel for Black women doctors. I just
Sharp.
received my
I
master's.
know those sisters, they sharp.
Right? We have graduate candidates, how important is that next step in education? Like, they say the master's is your bachelor's, like, and so forth. How important do you think?
I'm not sure how important it is. That's a really good question in regards to navigating space. I'm not sure it's important. I think it's necessary in regards to you understanding the landscape. So anytime that you can take advantage of what I call in the classroom is filling up your tool belt, the better it's going to have you to be able to navigate this space. Now, you quickly need to understand, are you going into sports from an academic perspective in the academy where you're going to teach more about sports and maybe do some consulting, right? Well, if you're going into the academy, having your doctorate is necessary. You won't be able to, in most cases, being able to even get a tenure track position. What I mean by tenure track, that's a whole academic side of this that is foreign to a lot of folks. To teach at a university, and there's different types in regards to tier one institutions, AAU, which are these high research institutions. You got to navigate that space as well. But generally speaking, to be at any four-year university institution, you need to have a doctorate to get on the tenure track. You can teach as a clinical professor. You can teach as an adjunct. Let me let you into a secret. People think that professors, they make some money, and that may be the case. But come in there as an adjunct, and you'll find that real quick. It's hard to live off that adjunct money when you're working for. And so it's that much of a divide. If you need to come in with a PhD or EDD, a doctorate, just to get on tenure track. Then the tenure track process is 5-6 years to be tenured. And this is what your peers saying that you've done enough research and published in journals, wrote grants, obtained some grants for them to even check the box off and say, yes, you're tenured, which is nice because now it lets you do something really just crazy. You can work through the process unless you're here in Texas and you have a governor that says that they want to take away things. That's a whole political discussion. But I'm just here to keep it real so you understand what's coming next. So that's one side in terms of tenure. So in that case, it's part of the business. You can't survive without it. Now in athletics, you don't necessarily need a doctorate to be an AD. But if you are a woman, minority, African American, it can enhance your opportunities because now you have the ability to navigate the space. And the other change is the industry's change. In terms of HBCUs, if you have an interest going to HBCUs, the marketplace for HBCUs, I've done research that you see a lot more of the ADs or VP of athletics and their senior level staff, a lot more of those individuals getting doctors. So that means you're competing against those now for the next job. And so if I'm sitting on a committee, I'm actually on a committee now, I've seen the actions of folks on the committee that look highly favorable of those that had doctors versus those that don't. So that unique part of the industry is changing in itself. Now, if you're looking at historical white colleges, right? Not so much. But now you're going to navigate a different space in regards to how comfortable they are with somebody that looks like you, whether it's a woman or a minority leading their program. There's a reason why that there are not a lot of minorities leading Power 5 institutions. And it's not because they don't have experience. They're not going to tell that lie. It's not because they're not smart and intelligent. It's because they haven't been given the opportunity. Let's be frank. So you have to really navigate that space early and develop those relationships with you. So that's a tough question in regards to just saying yes or no. You really start to look at early and understand what are your career path desires. What does that mean? Now, if you're going into professional sports, in terms of the general manager, ticket sales, VPs and all that, no, you probably don't need a doctor. Unless you just want to call it a doctor, you don't need it.
Thank you. Thank you for considering appearing with me. I'd like to open the floor up now for any questions.
Thank you.
So conclude our second session today. Thank you guys for having me.
Oh, we got one.
Go ahead.
I'm on? Okay, great. Good to see you again.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. I'm excited to be in your house today. You've been teaching grad students for a long time.
Yeah.
And you saw the academics on our panel previously, and I teach them now as well. What can you tell us, Dr. CAVIL, about the transition from graduate school, sports management degree or whatever, into the field and what that's like? What the biggest challenge and eye-opening thing that you've seen for those students transitioning? And advice that you give them, because you've taught them everything, you try to give them experiences, we work with them, but still they sometimes are not prepared for the transition. What can they do better to get that first job?
Thank you for that question. Because contextual is important. I think the first transition is really transitioning from you feeling that you know all this information and wanting to use it right away, and moving from being what we have said oftentimes is book smart to application, right? And so it's really taking those projects that you use in your courses and making them applicable in terms of the space that you're going. And those internships, those opportunities that you worked with collegiate sports or other sporting organizations, now it's time to build those relationships to the top. So really one of the first things you want to get into is being assertive, going to those organizational meetings, those after events, navigating that space so folks are comfortable with you. And number two is listening. Having the ability to listen and discern what is coming at you and how you move based on what you hear. So those are two general things that I talk about students prepare as they transition from graduate school into working.
Thank you.
Very important. What have you seen over the years since I have questions on my ass?
Me, same.
We met back when we were doing the in Austin, the Black Student Athlete Summit, and we had great dialogue. I apologize, I didn't keep up as much. But you've been in a position uniquely where you try to provide opportunities for folks in mid-management to get into executive management. What are some of the areas, based on what I kind of put together in terms of the academic side, where you see us needing to be more developing in terms of our curriculum in the industry based on things that you've seen and you're trying to help folks navigate this space?
There's a couple of areas that people talked about it earlier. One is developing that emotional intelligence that we need to really hone, some kind of way of honing the skills to be able to read when they step into that culture. Like I said, I talk about it all the time, that they transition from an academic culture to a university, a full-time job. How can they read what's the culture that they're stepping into? You mentioned this. We've got public, private, large, small, and geographical. 90% of the colleges and universities in this country are not in, like TCU. They're not in Houston. TSU. They're not in Houston. And so they're gonna be in rural communities, and how are you gonna be able to navigate? So it goes beyond just the learning the skill of that area that you're gonna be in, but how do I survive and succeed in an area that doesn't have a lot of people that look like me, doesn't have a lot of things for me to do that I feel comfortable in being able to do. And so how do we teach that side of it is something that we need to work on, because guess what? Yeah, there are jobs out there now. We just added 450,000 jobs, and I'm not just talking about this industry, but athletics has jobs, and they're needing people. People are gonna have to be able to travel. People are gonna have to be able to be mobile. But when they step into that culture there, how can they be prepared to be able to survive and succeed in that culture? And that's the one thing that I think is we need to teach our young people today. When I say young people, and I mean this, it makes no difference what level you're coming in at. You're still stepping into that.
Correct.
And you've got to be able to learn how to navigate and do that. The other thing I think that we need to teach them is patience. This process, because I come at this from, I've been taught delayed gratification. A lot of young people have been taught instant or immediate gratification. And I want to say this, nothing wrong with their value systems. They got the same value systems that we have. And those value systems have to deal with, we value family, we value friendship, we value hard work, we value all the same things. Just been taught at a different time. It's been coming at them so fast and immediate that they want to grow fast. They want to get there fast. And the people that are still in charge have been taught delayed gratification. They're saying, wait, take it easy, you'll get there. And so you've got to be able to have that patience to understand, how do I navigate, how do I maneuver through this process? And if I can do that, you will make it up that ladder.
Correct.
But you're not going to make it quick. You'll come in and bump your head up against that culture that says, take it easy, slow down, like you said in the tenure track. It's not an easy track. You're not going to get tenure in 2 years. You're gonna have to take your time and go through that and be patient to get there. And a lot of times they're not patient. They want to move on to the next big thing. And that's important for us to teach that. And those are things that you learn. We don't teach it in the classroom.
No.
You learn that on the job. And so I think those are things that we have to continue to teach our young people, or say to our young people. If you're interested in coming in this field, understand that it's going to take time. Now, is there the anomalies where people come in and 2 years later they shoot to the top? We've got some people that have made it to the AED-ship, but they're usually at Division II, Division III, small institutions.
Correct.
There's only 80 FBS. You're not going to make it to that level that quick. And there's people there that are making millions of dollars and not ready to go anyplace. So there's only so many jobs that are going to be out there. So I just say that they got to have that, understand that patience that they got to have.
In closing, but in closing, I'll echo that point. Is your ability to navigate your discernment in this industry is extremely important. And I'll take that back in terms on the academic side and see how you develop courses or a chapter within courses that talk about navigating the space of discernment over a period of time. Because the way you put that is exactly correct. With that, I say thank you. Hopefully I gave you some nuggets that will worth your time, and I appreciate the opportunity.